guys,
I'm Hallee.
and I'm Jamie.
And this is Literal Nonsense. Hey guys, welcome back to Literal Nonsense Podcast.
Thank you guys for all the support from our first episode. We're so excited about it. And in the process of releasing our first episode, we now are wherever you guys can get your podcasts. So we're on Spotify, Pandora. We made a YouTube channel.
We're still up and waiting for Apple and Google, but we will announce when we are now on there.
Yes, so we're working on that. We also have an Instagram page that you guys can follow for updates. We have a Facebook page as well. We'll be hosting discussions on there. If you guys want to submit theories for us to talk about, we would also love that.
Everything is Literal Nonsense Podcast.
Everything.
Like, spam, subscribe, push notifications on, do it all.
Share it. Share it to your friends.
Yeah, anyone you know who reads, send it to them.
And so we're pumped. We hope you guys are pumped.
Yeah.
And so we're ready for part 2 of this book. So in this episode, we will be discussing the whole second half of the book and we'll finish it up. So we will be talking about
chapters 24 to 46, which is pages like 212, I think, and to the end.
Yep. And so then we'll really get into it. The second half of this book picks up.
The first part, definitely, as we mentioned in the last episode, like snooze fest, because all backstory. And yes, this part 2 is also backstory, but things pick up and there's more at stake now.
And so let's get into it. All right, so last week we ended with Feyre starting to become vulnerable. She's getting used to being in Prythian. We noticed her painting. She's not locking her door. She's showing Tamlin her paintings. He removed the glamour, and also she wore a dress for the first time. So that was where we ended last week, and so let's get into the second half of this book.
So jumping right on in. Feyre wakes up one morning and she's scared out of her mind because there's this bird-looking creature in her room. And she's asking, like, where's Alice? And she's like, what? And spoilers, this is Alice. She's like, is Alice unwell? And she goes, are you out of your right mind? So, switch up. Since Tamlin removed the glamour, everybody is now looking how they truly look. And apparently Alice is some bird creature.
She has like a tree bark skin.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she looks completely different to the point that Feyre didn't recognize her. And this is like her true fairy form, which they glamored to not like scare her originally.
Yeah.
But then didn't tell her. So now, of course, she's scared.
Yeah, and to make things worse, she goes downstairs and there's like 1,000 people running around the house. And she's like, where did all these people come from? But it turns out Tamlin had glamored all of them to make her feel more comfortable.
Yes. And so she even brings up a point and she says, when I was following my father, who, wasn't her father, he was the puka, into the woods, did all these people see me? And Tamlin's like, yep. Like they were laughing at you, basically. So now she's embarrassed. She's like, oh, there were people here this entire time.
Yeah. It's like an episode of Punk'd,
Yeah. She's been punked.
Yeah. And then, so then she goes outside and there's a Fae head on a spike, like on the grounds.
Yeah. I think it was like, in a fountain.
Oh, yeah.
Like it was like a bird statue in the fountain. It's like a wren with like those pointy beaks, and then the head was just right on it.
Jump scare. So Tamlin basically says it's from the Night Court. So now we're introduced to a new court, which we haven't really delved much into. And I feel like that was like a way to like instill some fear into Feyre, and kind of like as the reader, you're like, what the hell? Like, what is going on? Right.
And so now she doesn't recognize any servants. She's spooked. Now there's a head on a fountain. Like the whole statue's covered in blood. And so we're starting to realize things are really going downhill. And so, yeah, so you have no idea what's going on as the reader. You just know this night court is apparently evil since they're putting severed heads on fountains. And Tamlin even says, oh, the night court is deadly, but this is only their lord's idea of a joke. So we're like, well, what is going on here?
What sick, perverted person thinks of that?
Right. And then they talk a little bit more, and he basically tells her, even though there's a severed head, you're completely safe here. And she's like, yay, great. And at the end, I just want to make this point for us to remember. She tells him, you never made me feel like a prisoner, never made me feel like little more than chattel. So I want us to just remember that she says that.
Interesting. I didn't realize. I forgot she said that.
Right. And I just saw it and I was like, ooh, we should mention this.
That's major.
And so she's just feeling a little weird, but now it's summer solstice, so she rallies. Just like all other parts of this book, something horrible happens, and Feyre, our queen of ignoring things, moves on with her life. So it is summer solstice, and it's a whole huge celebration, right? It's this happy day. There's music. There's dancing. Tamlin tells Feyre, solstice celebrates when the sun outshines the night. As the longest day of the year, it's a time when everyone can take down their hair and simply enjoy being a fairy. Not High Fae or fairy, just us, nothing else. So basically this means that all kinds of festive happiness is happening. And she compares it in direct contrast to Calamai. She's like, this is light and joyous and open, a mirthful sister to the bloodthirsty Fire Knight. So she's like, I hated that.
Ew. Mirthful.
But as fun as it is, right, there is the dancing, there is the singing. She's drinking the fairy wine. Lucian's like, girl, stop that, because she's acting all a fool with her dancing.
She's really letting her hair down.
Yeah.
Her clean hair.
Yeah, right, her clean hair. And I do want to mention, at a certain point, she's dancing to this crazy Fae music, and she looks over, and there is her man, and he is playing the fiddle. And
he's killing it.
Yeah, but I hate it.
Of all the instruments that he could play, she chose a fiddle.
Right, and I feel like he had even mentioned in the beginning, if I wasn't destined to be High Lord, I could have been a traveling musician.
Yeah.
That makes you sound just so...
What do they call those? A bard?
Or a minstrel?
In the old times when they would travel and sing songs to people.
Yeah. I mean, I just hate it. And I could imagine him doing that.
Yeah, for sure.
That should have been his path. And so she sees him playing his fiddle. And mind you, she's eating that shit up. She's like, my fiddling man. Getting hot and bothered by this guy on the fiddle. And so she dances for him, which is super cringy also.
Yeah.
Fiddle coupled by her dancing in front of him is just strong now.
Not it.
And he tells her, okay, let's go take a walk. Thank God. Please end our torture. And so he brings her to this super cool field with all these will-o'-the-wisps, which I liked that.
Yeah, that was cool.
Danced through that. Romantic.
Yes.
Loved it. Felt the vibe. But, again, Tamlin kills the vibe. He's looking at her, and he says, I'm thinking I might kiss you. Which I'm like, eh. Yeah.
I don't know. I could understand, how, if they're, nuzzled up close, and he's just yeah.
Or, right, a little cute ask, making sure she wants it.
Yeah.
I support it, but, ew. And then she says, then do it. You're both horrible in this moment. Oh, my God.
I think of, in Shrek, the movie, with that, little kid, and he's like, do the roar.
Yes. I don't like any of it. And then it says... His lips brushed mine, testing, soft and warm. He pulled back a little. He was still staring at me, and I stared right back. Oh my God. I don't know. I don't like it.
It's very childish.
Yes. It's giving first kiss in middle school.
Yeah.
And I'm like, she's had sex before. Mm-hmm. She's been screwing a guy in a barn.
I guess, I don't know.
And he's like,
it's supposed
ooh.
to be more like cutesy and like lovey, like, you know, because now she's more comfortable with him. So like he's not taking like that bad boy approach, you know. He's like, oh, I want to make you feel safe and loved.
But let's keep in mind, this comes directly after he just bit her fucking neck.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Yeah,
like, yes, right? And that's why that bite was so...
Well, because that was Calamai. He was overtaken by the magic of the land.
Right.
Do you think they like take shrooms and like then like gets just like unleashed?
Oh, they're definitely doing drugs on Calamai. Yeah. And like his fairy one definitely has like LSD in it. Yeah. Like they're loving it. So even though we're hating a little bit on summer solstice, Feyre does describe it as the happiest moment of her life.
Which is sad.
It is. And I think...
I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I think that's part of why SJM points that out, right? Mm-hmm. It definitely is a magical moment. It's nice. She's having her first kiss with the guy she likes. They're kind of starting to realize, okay, this is a romantic relationship we're having. We're dancing. There's music. But that being said, it's like a normal summer celebration. Mm-hmm. And the fact that it's the happiest moment of her entire life, I think SJM puts that there to point out just how tragic her life really has been.
Yeah. This is true.
And in SJM fashion, so she has the happiest moment of her life, and then SJM
ruins the moment.
Right, humbles us right back down. And the next day, her, Lucien, and Tamlin are all talking, and basically Lucien goes, oh, 24 Winter Court kids have been slaughtered because of this blight. And he goes on to describe that Fae children are super rare, so the fact that 24 have been murdered or killed because of this blight is like a very huge tragedy in their world, especially. So yeah, SJM bringing us right back down.
Happiest day, and then it's like children are dying. Great.
Right.
But also, while they're sitting together, all of a sudden the mood completely changes, and Feyre gets shoved behind the curtains in I guess they're in the dining room, right? Mm-hmm. And there's this presence that comes into the room, and cue the morally gray man.
Right. She looks and goes, I'd met him before. He'd saved me from those 3 fairies on Fire Night. So that guy that we were super intrigued about, here he is.
He's back.
He's back, and we're so excited.
Surprise, surprise.
And so we learned his name. His name is Rhys, or Rhysand.
Rhysand.
Yep. So he's here.
And we also find out that he's the High Lord of the Night Court.
Right.
So this is the guy who stuck somebody's head on a stick.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine, like, what the hell is going through Faye's mind.
Right, because she's like, he saved me, but he's clearly severing heads out here. And so they're also referring to him as Amarantha's whore. So you're like, who is Amarantha? Why is this man her whore? And he even says, her whore I might be, but not without my reasons. So you're like, what the fuck is going on?
I think this is like when like Pandora's box is opened.
Yes, yeah.
Because really everything from this point on just goes downhill.
Absolutely. And because it really goes downhill when he notices a third place setting at the dining room table.
Yes.
And he gets pissed.
And he's like, who are you hiding from me?
Right. And so Lucien makes up some bullshit ass lie. And he's like, my betrothed. And you're like, what the fuck, Lucien?
He comes out of nowhere with that one. But I mean, as you can imagine, guess what? The curtain gets pulled back and there's Feyre.
Right. And then he even says to her, if you were wise, you would be screaming and running from this place, from these people. And then basically she looks confused as fuck, because she is.
Yeah. And
he goes, oh, she doesn't know, does she? And so now it's like the Band-Aid's ripped off. She's like, what don't I know? What have Lucien and Tamlin been hiding from me? And so he basically just starts tormenting them.
Yeah, and Tamlin, in Tamlin fashion, is literally groveling at Rhysand's feet. Like,
which is so pathetic.
And I just think it's funny because, as we will see, Tamlin does this quite often when he's like in a situation that he's trying to get out of.
Right, because basically Rhys starts threatening them. I will tell Amarantha who you are, get her out of here. Like, do you know what they'll do to her? And so literally Tamlin presses his forehead to the floor and grovels at Rhys's feet, which is just, I mean, you're both High Lords, right? So in theory, you should be essentially equal, which we find out in a little bit that Rhys is the strongest, most powerful High Lord in history, but they're still pretty equivalent in some senses of the word, right?
Yeah.
And so this guy is groveling.
Well, you know what's like so funny? It's like while his forehead is to the floor, Rhysand is like, "You're far too desperate."
Right, like even he's like, dude.
It's off-putting. Becoming High Lord made you so boring. And
right.
Tamlin's like, "Are you going to tell Amarantha?" And he's like, "Maybe I will, maybe I won't. Like, I'll see how I feel."
Right, because he's fucking with him. Because he almost is like, dude, have a set of balls.
Yeah.
You know, like, I'm telling you to beg, but maybe you should have put up a fight instead of diving to the floor.
Yeah, make me work for it a little bit, you know?
Right. And so then Rhys asks Feyre what's her name, and she says the first name that comes to her head, which is Claire Better. That's going to be relevant in a little bit, so just remember that is who she says she is. And so after this visit, Tamlin is scared fucking shitless and is like, Feyre, gotta go home.
Yep.
I'm releasing you. I'm sending you home.
Which is crazy, because this is like probably such a traumatic, insane moment for her. And, you know, all the beautiful moments that they've had together in the spring court, he's just like, yeah, nah, sorry, this isn't gonna work out. You gotta leave.
And even she's like, I don't understand. What about the treaty that you told me about? And then she's asking who Amarantha is. And he's like, didn't you read between the lines? And she's like, no, you're not telling me anything. And so basically she's even like, do I have to leave for a week? Like,
I feel like if like Feyre wasn't, like, if she wasn't spending all her time in the woods and like maybe got like an education and stuff, she would have been onto the stuff like earlier.
Maybe, but I also think they didn't give her much to work off. Like, she knows something's wrong. She's smart enough to realize that, at least. They're just not... They keep saying they're hinting at things. They're not. Like, they're really trying their best to make it hard for her.
Yeah, they're brushing it off.
Right. And so he basically is like, you gotta go home. And because he's following his typical Tamlin fashion, this is the first time they have sex. So because he's sending her away...
A farewell.
Yeah, which... What, like, a pussy move.
Yeah.
You're finally making your feelings known as you're sending her home, right? And A, you're a pussy for more than one reason. You are sending her home because Rhys just scared the shit out of you. And B, you're sending her home and then having sex with her and making yourself vulnerable. But, it doesn't matter how she feels. I'm going to just push her off. And going on that train of thought, as she's falling asleep after they have sex... He, like, whispers, I love you.
Yeah.
As she's literally falling asleep, so she can't answer.
Come on. Like, are you afraid of rejection?
I think he is.
But then he really is stupid, because I feel like the person that Feyre is, like, she literally has nothing. Her whole life now is the spring court because she is a part of this treaty.
Right. So I agree with what you're saying, actually.
So, technically she is his prisoner, but, like...
Yeah, like,
you know what I'm trying to say?
I don't think that he's nervous of her rejection. I think that just being vulnerable, I don't know what his deal is. But he takes, like, a pussy cop-out every time.
Yeah. I don't know. Well, obviously we are very upset that he would do this, but so is Lucien.
Right. Lucien honestly feels the same way we do.
Like, he is pissed. So pissed. And, you know... Like, while she's leaving, he makes a comment. Was it to Tamlin?
Yeah, it's, he's speaking to Tamlin.
Yeah, he's like, you're not even going to give her a few more days, just a few, before you send her back to that human cesspit?
So he's pissed.
And Tamlin's like, it's not up for discussion. Like, go away.
Which, we're going to notice this is a theme with Tamlin. No discussions to be had. Tamlin's way or the highway. Always.
Yeah.
And so, he's like, I'm sending her home.
And she's, like, shoved in this on the horse. And it's like, yep, let's go. And off she goes.
And she's upset, obviously, but she knows she has no choice. And again, as she's fucking leaving, Tamlin tells her, I love you, as she's literally pulling off.
Yeah.
So again, no room for her to answer physically. Or I also think, honestly, he's not giving her any room or space to process that he's saying these things, giving her a chance to answer or reciprocate.
And all she has to do is say, I love you back, and all their problems would be fixed.
Right, and he knows that, and he's not giving it a chance. So I do think that shows that he does love her, and he's getting her out of harm's way. So we'll find out again that her love would fix everything. I think he's putting that aside because he does love her and is trying to save her. But it doesn't make me like him.
No.
I think it just is all stupid decisions one after another.
No, but I think like with the first read, like because you're just like, you have no idea what's going on. You're like, oh my God. Like,
well, right, because you don't know.
Crazy.
You also don't know that her I love you would do anything.
Yeah, exactly.
On the second read that you know that, you're like,
you're a dumbass.
Dude,
yeah.
Like, you're making horrible choices.
Yeah, like, let's get it together, bro.
And he doesn't get it together. And so Feyre goes home. She, indeed, back to the human realms she goes. And she rides up to a giant manor, and she's like, what the hell?
What an upgrade.
Yeah. And so...
in the woods, no more.
No more little shack for them. And so Elaine comes running out. She's super happy. And as per usual, Nesta is super cold. We're going to find out a little bit more about that in a second. And so Elaine, when they start speaking, she first of all notices a difference in Feyre, says, you look happier, you look physically different.
She's like glowing.
Right. And so we notice that right away. And then Elaine also tells her, oh yeah, this is crazy. All those ships of our fathers that sunk, turns out they didn't sink. We're super rich.
Yeah, and then she also cues us into the story that like Tamlin made them believe, that Feyre went to go stay with the rich aunt, and Elaine's like, I wrote you all these letters, didn't you get them? And Feyre was like, oh no. Oh, is that what you were doing?
Right, she's like, ah, man, I was so busy.
Yeah, exactly.
And so Elaine kind of serves as our point of reference. We find out what has been going on since Feyre has been gone. We find out, Tamlin couldn't just give them all these riches with no explanation. We know what he spun for them, the story he spun for Feyre as well. And now, when Feyre's back home, she goes into town, and we see Isaac again, our buddy.
Oh, he came back.
Which he
Farm boy.
Right. He seems so relevant after all this.
Yeah, but he's with a lady.
He is. He's with his new wife.
Yeah, and Feyre doesn't give a shit.
No, and she doesn't. And I think it's honestly nice, because as she's looking at them, the wife looks at them kind of like, ooh, what's going on here? Because they both look at each other with, meaning. And she says, after they passed each other, I smiled broadly at him, at them both, and bowed my head, wishing them well with my entire heart. So she's like, fine. She never loved him. We know she didn't. And she even says, human. He seemed so human with his gangly limbs, his simple handsomeness. And she's like just shitting on his human traits.
Yeah.
Like she's like, I'm above this now.
Yeah, I've upgraded. Sorry.
I need to just date Fae men only.
Well, she does.
Right.
So anyways, she ends up, she goes back to the house. I don't know. She has a conversation with Nesta. And Nesta's like, yeah, well, you know what? This is so nice. Elena's so happy that you're home. But whatever that beast told us didn't work on me. She was like, I knew you were taking over the wall, and I knew you weren't with this rich aunt. And we also find out that Nesta tried to go after Feyre.
Which is crazy.
She was willing to risk her life to cross over into Prythian to get her sister back when she wouldn't even chop wood for her.
And actually, I realized just now, when I said the mercenary never comes back, kind of technically she does, because Nesta goes, I hired that mercenary from town to bring me a week after you were taken. So I guess she served the point of bringing Nesta to the wall, or into the woods. But yeah, Nesta, this cold-hearted bitch, went after her.
Yeah. And, I think that just goes to show that Nesta really does care about Feyre in her own sick way. Because even Farrah was like, you did that for me. And Nesta was like, well, it wasn't right. Like, you know, I guess she felt like a duty as an older sister too.
Which is interesting, like you just said, because she's never felt that before. And I think
maybe she was jealous.
Right?
Maybe Nesta wanted to be the chosen one.
She was like, can a Fae come and take me, please?
Yeah.
But I think this is also the first time that Feyre ever acknowledges and understands Nesta in some fashion, right?
Yeah.
Because she even says, but she had cared, beneath it she had cared, and perhaps loved more fiercely than I could comprehend, more deeply and loyally. So I think Feyre's finally like, oh, this cold facade she has going on, maybe like this is just her way of loving and her defense mechanism from like our childhood. And so because of this little moment of clarity for Feyre tells Nesta the truth. She's like, I'm going to tell you the whole story. Tells her all about these Fae. There's a blight.
Her High Lord.
Right. Tells her just all the tea. And Nesta must be shocked.
Yeah. Can
you imagine?
No. I'd be like, you are probably like still on some type of drugs, whatever they gave you. Like, are you hallucinating?
Right. And in this moment, I'm sure Nesta's shocked beyond words. Like, I'd also be convinced that she was on drugs. But because I think now Feyre's also opening up to her, Nesta's opening up back, is kind of going back and forth, and we're seeing this first moment of closeness with them. And so Nesta admits that she hated Feyre, basically, which is crazy because, again, she supported you. But she said that she hated Feyre for doing the things that she couldn't, right? She was supporting the family and she kind of resented her. But then she also makes it a point to say, but I resented our father more.
Yeah, because he did nothing to help their mom when she was dying.
And she also says, too, right, on top of letting the mom die, and Nesta was older at that point, so she was very aware that the mom was dying. And she even said, you know, when Feyre was out hunting, she almost wanted to, like, test the father by not helping and getting more food.
Yeah, to see if he would do anything.
Right.
And
like,
he didn't.
if he would actually go out and fight for us. I couldn't take care of us, not the way you did. I hated you for that, but I hated him more. Because, again, he let the mom die, and then he got his kneecap broken. He started whittling wood. How is that going to feed anyone?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, Nesta pretty much just opens her dirty laundry and is like, this is how I felt about it. And it's kind of a bonding moment for them, right? And so they continue talking. They have a nice family dinner. And again, big bomb dropped. So we find out in conversation, oh no, the Better's mansion is burnt down.
Yep. And Feyre's like,
uh-oh.
Yeah, I need to go back to Prythian because she's worried about Tamlin and like what else may have happened while she was sent away.
Right. And I believe they also mentioned, I'm not sure if this is evident or not, but Claire's body is missing. So I think she's like, oh, there's foul play.
Yeah.
Something's going on, and if they took a human, like, what happened?
So Feyre ends up going back to Prythian, and she gets to the manor, and it's destroyed. And she finds Alice, and Alice kind of tells her the whole story of this quote-unquote blight is actually this ex-Highburn commander named Amarantha. And so, circling back to the 50 years ago, Amarantha, came over from Highburn, and she hosted this big ball, and the spring court was all wearing masks. And at that ball, she took away or like nullified all of the Fae's powers. But the reason why spring court was hit the hardest was because Tamlin refused to bed her.
Right, which is crazy because we're seeing this cringy ass man and he refuses her, number one, which is crazy because he's fucking random fairies and caves.
Yeah.
And then she's so tight and bothered about this fiddling fairy man.
Yes.
That she curses the entire continent.
Yes, but we also find out that her sister
yes.
Had a human lover, and he like betrayed her. So Amarantha hates humans because her sister ended up getting killed by her human lover. And so she's really got, like, major beef with, I guess, everyone.
Right. Like, she already hates the humans because of this betrayal and, you know, her sister's murder.
Mm-hmm.
And then...
Well, she hates it even before that because of the treaty that was signed.
Yes.
Because she was working for Hybern, and Hybern hates the treaty that was signed, so he hates the humans, and he hates the High Fae and Prithian.
Right, so there's, like, mad layers to her hatred. It runs deep.
Yeah, there's a lot here to unpack.
So, yeah, there really is. So basically, yes, let's, like, break it down. So Hybern already hates the treaty because they're on this small island. The treaty does not benefit them. They think the humans are less than them. Okay, great. That's part one. Part two, Amarantha's sister had a human lover. It was like, yay, unity of Fae and humans. Not the case. The human betrays her. He ends up killing her. Mm-hmm. So now Amarantha's like part two of why I hate humans, right? Now, Tamlin, when he was a little boy, used to go to Hybern with his father.
Yes.
Like, they had, like, you know, a partnership.
Yeah. They had, like, the...
Trading?
Yeah, they had, like, the best relationship, I guess you could say, out of all the other courts.
In Hybern, right. So
Which is like,
Correct. Keep that in mind. And so Tamlin knew Amarantha from when they were younger, right? And so Tamlin also hates her because Lucian was sent to Hybern to kind of be an emissary to have peace, right? After all this treaty, Tamlin's like, let's reopen trading. She refused, and Lucian got a little sassy, as he does. And in repayment for his sass, she cuts out Lucian's eye.
Oh, yes, yes.
So she sends Lucian back a bloody, disgusting mess. Tamlin is so upset. They also mention, kind of as a reminder and a similarity in the book, that Tamlin vomited when he saw Lucian. So kind of like Lucian vomited when he saw the fairy's wings cut off.
Yeah.
We're seeing this like really gruesome and, you know, very reactive bodily reaction to what's being done. These horrible torture methods. Okay, so now this is all happening. That's our base setup. Mm-hmm. Now, Amarantha's like, JK, guys. I actually want to throw you a party because that was really fucked up what I did to Lucian. Oopsies, I'll throw you a party. It's going to be great. They go to this party under the mountain. And now at this party, the reason they're wearing masks is because she was like, I cut his eye out. Everyone wear masks so that we can't see his horrible, disgusting face.
Yeah.
Great. So now she tries to come on Tamlin. She's like, hey there, buddy. Like, I want to go to bed with you. And he's like, you cut my friend's eyeball out.
Yes.
Fuck yourself.
Yeah.
And so he says in front of everyone that he would sooner take a human to his bed, sooner marry a human than ever touch her. Now, think of all of our history.
Yeah, so Amarantha's like, now you're going to eat your words.
So, basically, she said, fuck you. They all did a toast. Somehow there was like a spell on that drink. Mm-hmm. Great. And so she cursed them all. Now that's how the Spring Court's masks are stuck to their face. And now all the High Lords and all the courts are under her power. And she says to them, if you ever want to break the curse, the only way to do it is for Tamlin to break the curse. And he need only find a human girl willing to marry him. But not just any girl, of course, because that wouldn't be specific enough. But a human girl with ice in her heart, with hatred for our kind. A human girl willing to kill a fairy. So that is how we get to where we are now. So Feyre killed a fairy.
Mm-hmm. And she's like, oh my god. And I love him. And Alice is like, you stupid girl. Like, why didn't you figure this out?
Mind you, we just spent like 5 minutes literally meticulously explaining it because that's how complex it is. And Alice is like, how did you not realize? Like, no shit.
Yeah, and Feyre was like, this was all a lie. Like, I can't believe this.
Yeah, and Alice, I think, even tells her that there is no treaty.
Yeah.
At all. So that whole thing where Tamlin's like, you need to come spend your life in Prithian?
Mm-hmm.
Not true.
And, you know, in order for them to get out of this predicament that they were all in, Tamlin was literally sending one of his soldiers, like, every day into the human lands, hoping that one of them will get killed so that he can pretend that this treaty was a thing and take over the human.
Right. So
to Prithian.
He did all the work, and then like 2 days before the years were up, he was like, Feyre, go home.
Yeah. What? Like,
and I think that's because he really loved her, and he was like, I'm not willing to risk her. Like, I will doom us all to this fate to save her. Which, stupid, but admirable.
Yeah, I guess. Well, however you want to slice and dice it, now they're even in a worse off situation than they were before. So
yes,
now Feyre's like, well, where are they? Like, where is everyone? Where's Tamlin? And she was like, oh, they're under the mountain. And right. Feyre's like, take me there. Maas is like, you're an idiot. You're going to die there. And she was like, I have to go.
Yeah, and so Alice kind of is just resigned. And she's like, I'll take you, but you're going to die. And so Alice takes Feyre. Now, I want to talk, I think, a little bit about this curse. I'm mixed on if I think it's just too specific and too, like, wow, this was perfect.
It's a book, Jamie. Of course it's going to work out exactly the way it's supposed to. What do you mean?
I just think, like, it almost is like this first book compared to the rest of the series, which we will talk about. This first book is definitely very, like, Beauty and the Beast, Hades, Persephone, like, very, oh, there's this magical curse and there's masks on your face. And I think compared to the rest of the series, this comes off as a little corny.
Oh, for sure. I mean,
that was more what I meant.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, yeah, I mean, I agree for sure, but I think it's just because it has to be, okay, as a writer, right? You need to write things flowery kind of at the beginning, or you're going to start with devastation. You have to do something to hook the reader in, right? So being that this is high fantasy and romantasy, like that whole genre, like I feel like it has to be like cutesy and then like, oh my God, and then cutesy again, and then like, oh my God. And for things to like be so close to working out and then it's ripped away and then there's a hero, who comes and saves the day.
Right. And I do see what you're saying. I think I just lean more towards start me off with devastation.
Okay. Well, yeah, because I would agree with you, but we are sick people. So I feel like that's the shit that we like.
Yeah, like maybe everyone else is like, this wasn't corny at all. And we're like, give us bloodshed. Yeah.
The Fae head on the spike was not enough.
Right. Well, guess what? We're going to get some bloodshed. So Feyre is taken to the tunnel that leads under the mountain. Alice is like, see you later. Okay, great. And so she goes under the mountain. She's in the tunnels. And pretty much right away, the adder finds her.
Oh, boy.
Because she's not very stealthy, which you think she would be after years in the woods, but she is not. And so the adder finds her and brings her into the throne room where Amarantha and all of them are waiting, and pretty much immediately as she walks into the throne room, she sees Claire's body.
Dangling from the ceiling.
Tortured, bloody. Again,
nasty.
Give us the devastation.
Yeah, like a Halloween prop, for
Here
sure.
It is.
Can you imagine, like, you're going to save your man under the mountain, and you're like, yeah, like, let's do this. This creature, this nasty creature, the adder finds you, and he's like, oh, my precious, I'm going to bring you to my master. She walks into this massive fucking throne room, and there's all these fae, and then there's just a human body dangling from the ceiling.
Yeah, I wouldn't be super thrilled. I'd be like, oh, I think I made a mistake. I'm going back home.
Yeah, and Amarantha's like, what did you bring me? Like, who is this?
Right.
Which I think was interesting, because, like, I don't know, just the way that she came off, you're like, like, she seems a little playful, which is going to be dangerous.
Yes, right. And so, even at this point, now Amarantha's also a little pissed because she goes to Rhys and she's like, who's the girl dangling from the ceiling? And he's like, I don't know, I've never seen this girl. Like, I have no idea. Like, so he's lying. So that's a little point for us that we're like, what's his deal?
Yes.
This is suspicious. And so she's in the room. She's meeting all these people, right? We also see Amarantha on top of her being a little, like, sly, sarcastic, fun kind of vibe.
Guess who's next to her?
Tamlin. Which we're like...
And her hands are, like, prowling up his leg.
Yes, and on her hand is this eye. And there's a finger bone around her neck and an eye in a ring.
Mm-hmm.
And Feyre's like, oh my god, that's the human that like betrayed her sister. So we learn his name is Jurian.
Yes.
And Feyre's like, oh, this lady's nuts.
Yeah, she's like, abort mission.
So she's in trouble. And now this psycho woman is feeling up her man.
Yeah. And the whole time, like, Feyre's trying to, like, catch Tamlin's attention, and he refuses to look at her. Like, he's looking everywhere but her.
And imagine that. Imagine you go save your man, and you're like, oh, there's a dead body dangling from the ceiling, tortured. She has a fucking eyeball and a finger bone as jewelry. And you're like, I came to save the one I love, and he won't even make eye contact.
Yeah.
That is fucked up. And so, even though he won't look at her, she's like, I come to claim Tamlin. He's mine. I want him back. And so Amarantha goes, okay, you know what? Fine. I'll make a bargain with you. Sounds good.
Uh-oh.
Yes. And she goes, you complete 3 tasks of my choosing, 3 tasks to prove how deep that human sense of loyalty and love runs, and Tamlin is yours. So this kind of circles back to my point before about the curse, and it was like a little corny.
Mm-hmm.
3 tasks comes off to me. That's so corny. It just is very childhood fairy tale with a twist for sure, and like a dark concept added.
Yeah.
But, and again, maybe this is because I'm thinking of how in depth and how original the rest of the series gets, and I appreciate that. I feel like this first book kind of just feels like an author who goes, oh, we retell Beauty and the Beast or all the classic childhood fairy tales.
Mm-hmm.
And it just comes off as kind of,
Well, and also, like, I feel like Amarantha as well, when we get deeper into the books, she's kind of, like, not the most menacing. Like, they face harsher shit.
Right, like, she's like a fairy tale villain.
Yeah, but I think maybe the reason why it's, like, very petty and, like, childlike is because she is petty.
Right, like, she's literally doing all this because this guy wouldn't have sex with her.
Yeah, she's, like, a scorned teenager.
Yeah, so that could, like, add to, like, she's, like, doing all this just for her own amusement. She could literally just kill Feyre right there, and she's like, haha, let's see you do 3 tasks. And it's like, all right, relax, lady.
Yeah, she's really making a show out of this.
And she even says, let's add another element. And she says, you complete all the tasks, or when you can't stand it anymore, all you have to do is answer one question, a riddle. You solve the riddle, and his curse will be broken instantaneously. So again, kind of going to the point, not only do we have the corny concept of 3 tasks, we now have a mystery riddle. So yeah, I feel like Amarantha's just like taken plays out of all the little fairy tale books.
Yeah, it's a little snatch here, snatch here.
So again, I don't hate it. I just think the other books get better. So if you...
The depth isn't there right now.
Right. And so if you're like dissuaded because of like, oh, this is kind of Beauty and the Beast, Hades, Persephone, tasks, riddles, not my thing, kind of corny,
Hold on.
you. Yeah. Keep going, because it's not this corny the whole time.
Well, this is just like a step, right? I feel like this book is just like an introduction.
Right. Like even this whole Amarantha's curse and stuff.
Yeah.
Literally book 2 feels like a whole different series.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like you need it to be simple enough that like it's easy to read and like engage your audience, because I feel like off the bat, like if you really just dive in, you're going to lose people.
Well, we had said that too, right? Looking at the map of Prythian way in the beginning, she's only in the Spring Court.
Yeah.
We know there's more courts. We know she'll probably go there eventually and explore this whole Fae world, but we're starting small for the first book just to introduce plot points.
Yeah.
So I do agree with that, and I think it does engage the reader. I just think if you're a reader who's seeing this and thinking, oh, I want more depth, you will get it.
Yeah, for sure.
And so this is not the end all of tasks. And so she tells her this, and then they beat the shit out of her.
Yes. Well, before they beat the shit out of her,
I was like, get her.
You know, Amarantha's like, so, like, is this agreed? Are we doing this? And Tamlin, like, looks at Feyre, and his eyes widen, and she says, like, it's like a clear no. But she's thinking in her head, like, I have no other choice.
Mm-hmm.
She says that she loves Tamlin with a fierceness that swept up her whole heart because she knows that he still loves her. And she's just like, agreed. And then she goes, okay, give her a greeting worthy of my court or something.
And now they beat the shit out of her.
The shit out of her. They literally, she says, I became their punching bag.
No, they literally kick her, like, and fuck her up.
Yeah. And then she wakes up and she's in a cell.
Right. So she basically, her reward, quote unquote, for accepting these challenges is we're going to beat you up and throw you in the cell.
Yeah, exactly. So she's in this cell. Obviously, she's like not functional because she like can't even move. And lo and behold, Lucian shows up. And I remember reading that for the first time, and I was like, oh my god, like, he does care about her. Like, they are friends.
Well, I think that comes full circle, right? He didn't help her.
True.
when the Naga were coming after her.
Yeah.
And so I think maybe he probably feels a sense of guilt, and he's like, okay, now, like, I know she needs that. Like, I just watched her literally get her ass kicked. She clearly needs some kind of help.
Yeah.
Let me go help her. And I think that could be him being like, all right.
Mm-hmm. But he kind of like pulls a Tamlin and he's like, you shouldn't have come, Feyre. Like, why are you here? Don't you understand? Like, you're being foolish. And she's like, well, I'm here now. So, we just have to deal with it.
Right. Like, she's like, I can't just say never mind.
Yeah. And Lucian now realizes that Feyre knows the whole story.
Right. And he's like, all right, so damn, you know everything. She's like, okay, dude, my nose is broken. Don't really care. Help me. And so he fixes her a little bit as much as he can without kind of getting caught or in trouble.
And then he disappears.
Yeah, that's really it. He's like, all right, well, see you later, I guess. You're going to have to do these 3 tasks.
Yeah. So she's thrown back into the throne room. And so Amarantha finds out that Lucian was the one who patched her up.
Yes. And she's not happy. And to kind of get back at her for that, she's asking Feyre's name, and Feyre won't tell her name. So now that she's kind of pissed that Lucian helped her out, she brings Lucian forward and is like, what is her name? And she's going to torture him or even kill him to get this information out of him. And Feyre now also has a soft spot for Lucian, and so she just blurts her name out because she doesn't want to see him get killed. She knows he just helped her.
Yeah.
She knows that he's on her team, he's on her side, and she's like, okay, like, saying my name is really not going to matter that much. She does fear for her family, what saying her name will bring them. But she even mentions that she could have wept with relief when she didn't ask for my family name. So she only asked her first name. So she's like, all right, that's fine. I'll answer it because really, how are you going to figure out anything else? So she feels fine with that. And she saves Lucian's life in the process. Now, this whole time, Lucian's about to get murdered because she won't say her name. She's clearly tortured in the cell. Tamlin is doing nothing.
Yeah. And are we surprised? No.
And she's confused. Like, maybe we're not surprised, right? Because that's clearly evident from when she first walked in. He did nothing.
Yeah.
He's still doing nothing. But she's even like, why did Tamlin do nothing? Say nothing. Won't say anything. Won't yell out. Nothing at all. He is just bland. He doesn't even have an expression on his face.
Mm-hmm. And you can also start to see, like, her frustration because she wants to solve this riddle and she can't think of what the answer is.
Which, okay, so on my first read, I did figure it out.
I didn't.
So I'm going to read it. And if you haven't read the book, let us know if you figured it out. If you have read the book, let us know, thinking back, if it's obvious. So she now tells her the riddle and says, if you solve this, no tasks, you're good to go. Everyone's curse is broken. So the riddle is, there are those who seek me a lifetime, but never we meet, and those I kiss, but who trample me beneath ungrateful feet. At times I seem to favor the clever and the fair, but I bless all those who are brave enough to dare. By large, my ministrations are soft-handed and sweet, but scorned, I become a difficult beast to defeat. For though each of my strikes lands a powerful blow, when I kill, I do it slow. Now, this girl's illiterate, so she's like, what?
Yeah. She can't even read, let alone figure out a riddle.
Yeah, no. Not at all.
Yeah.
Poor girl is like, I have no idea. Granted, she is illiterate, but I feel like she's pretty smart. And I feel like she, like, can have normal conversation. She probably could have figured it out, but I also think she's under a lot of stress. And she's kind of probably just thinking about, and thinking about Tamlin's dumbass.
Yeah. The answer was right there, girl.
Right.
Well, anyways, so now guess what? The first task begins.
Oh, boy. This, I think, is my favorite of all three.
Yeah, I would agree, because it's the most action that we get. And it's a task that really puts Feyre's skills to the test.
And so, let's get into it.
Okay, so basically, she's dropped into this pit, and there's all the Fae, like, seated around the pit. And in the pit, there's, like, a maze, and come to find out, there's this giant worm.
In the pit.
In the pit, and it's gonna eat Feyre.
And let's be honest, the first time we all read this book,
yes,
every single one of us imagined the Alaskan bullworm from SpongeBob.
Yeah.
Now, if you Google, like, a worm, which is WYRM, I think, right?
Yeah.
It's like this, like, crazy, nasty, vicious-looking beast.
Yeah, it's pretty scary.
I straight up imagined that bald-ass worm.
Yes.
From a SpongeBob.
Yes. All right, so now we have this nasty worm in the pit with Feyre. And she's running around trying to escape it, but then she realizes that it can't see.
Right.
So
yeah, she's in this maze, and she's like, great.
Yeah, so she rolls in the mud in his feces to disguise herself. And Rhysand makes a point, because all the fairies are like, what is she doing? And Rhysand's like, oh, like, she just realizes that it can't see.
And right, because remember, Feyre is a hunter at heart, and so she knows how to hide herself, how to track. And this is the challenge that we really can see that come to light.
Yeah, so she, makes points like, oh, if she wants me to hunt, then I'll hunt. So she realizes that she has to pick, like, her battleground, like how she's going to defeat this beast.
Mm-hmm.
And I forgot about this, but Lucien is, like, telling her, like, oh, to your left, because she's in a maze, so she can't, like, see, like, where it's at.
Right, so he really is going to bat for her.
Yeah. And so basically she sets up these spikes, like, in another pit.
Yeah, like,
and
shards of bone.
Yeah, and she goes to the worm, entices it, she's like, hey, I'm here, and it starts following her. She, like, rounds the corner, and the worm goes flying into the pit, impales itself on these spikes, and the worm is now dead.
And she even looks at Tamlin, right? And so...
My Tamlin.
Yes, she says, my Tamlin. But I also want to make a point, like, Lucian's going to bat for her, screaming, and Tamlin's not doing anything again. Mm-hmm. And so the worm impales itself, it's dead, but in this process, she actually ends up breaking her arm.
Yes.
And it's like a gruesome break.
Through the skin.
Disgusting. But even among that, she just busted her ass, and Amarantha's like, I suppose anyone could have done that. Like, what a bitch.
Like, she's a human, come on.
Right.
Give her a little credit.
And Amarantha even makes a point to say that everyone bet against her except for one person. And Feyre, just to, like, shove it home, takes one of the bones and, like, throws at her and all this nasty feces.
Yeah, tries to take her out, too. Obviously, it doesn't work. But then Amarantha is like, okay, take her away. I'm tired of her mundane face.
Right.
It's like, oh, shit, okay. And then she passes out from the pain of her broken arm. And she's back in her cell. And she's in there for days, and no one comes to her.
And she's like, I'm going to die.
Yeah. So she's, like, making peace with the fact that she's going to die from this wound. And so she's pretty much given up all hope at this point. But where it gets good. So as she is laying there, just dying, she's starting to hallucinate. Rhys just comes right in. Poof, here he is.
And you're so happy, but she's not. She tells him to go to hell.
Yeah, get away.
And in this process, they start talking. She's yelling at him, even though she's dying. he reveals that he's actually the one who bet on her.
Yeah. He's like, you made me a lot of money.
Right. And again, he's saying it sarcastic, kind of like a swaggering asshole kind of vibe, but you're like, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Does he really believe that she'd win and he wants to win a lot of money? Maybe. I don't know.
But he gave a fake name to Amarantha.
Right. What's going on?
Pretends he doesn't notice her, like know who she is when she comes into the throne room.
And so I think that's a huge point that on the first read, we don't look at, right? We look at the base facts. But as we are all told, as these stupid teenagers who are falling for all these dumb men who are saying all these pretty things, Tamlin's saying things, right, previous, I love you, this, that, whatever. His actions suck.
Yes.
Reese is saying a bunch of not good things.
Yeah.
But his actions give you some pause.
Exactly.
So ladies, actions over words.
Always.
Do it.
So Rhysand is like, don't you want me to heal your arm? And she's like, get out. And he's like, come on, like, you're going to die. And she was like, well, what's the cost? So in true Fae fashion, they make a bargain.
They do. And he at first says that he wants 2 weeks every month, 2 weeks of his choosing, that she'll come live with him. And so again, this is where like the Hades Persephone vibe comes in. As the conversation goes on, he's like, all right, one week a month, because 2 weeks a month is half of the time.
Well, I just think it's interesting that he's willing to, like barter with her.
That is true.
And Feyre is also so, like, you could tell she's so against it. And she's trying to not make this bargain, but he's like, you're gonna die. Come on, what's 2 weeks? What's 1 week?
And she holds out for a while. And she tells him to go to hell. I don't want to do this. Finally, which I don't love this part, even knowing future books, this part still kind of makes me like, ugh. He grabs the shard of bone in her arm and twists it.
Yeah.
Which is like, even as you read the series, you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
Bro, don't do that. And so he basically says, okay, I'm going to leave then.
Well, she spits in his face after he does.
Yeah, which, amen. Good job. And then, he even says, I bet you'll be spitting on Death's face when she comes to claim you too. And he starts to leave. He's like, fine, fuck you.
Yeah. And he's like fading away. And then she agrees. She's like, wait.
Right. She's like, oh, actually, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
So, fine. So, she accepts this bargain. He eventually agrees to the 1 week a month. They go back and forth, 5 days, 10 days, a week. Okay, great, fine. So a week it is, all this stuff. They make a bargain, and all of a sudden she has a full sleeve.
Yeah.
And she's like, whoa.
Yeah, make it go away, I said, and he laughed.
He's like, no. And she's like, what is this? And he tells her, in the Night Court, it's custom for bargains to be permanently marked upon the flesh. So it's there. And of course, her first thought is, oh my God, what's Tamlin going to think?
Yes.
Feyre.
And he knows that.
He does know that. And he thinks it's hysterical.
Yeah.
Which I do too.
Yeah, of course.
But it's also like, Tamlin, if you cared that much, you should have gone and saved her. Like, Reese is Amarantha's whore. So she clearly has tabs on him, knows where he is. Okay, fine. He clearly snuck away. Lucian clearly snuck away to save her. If you're telling me that Tamlin's on like this like 24/7 watch, I don't think so.
Well, yeah, because, as we find out a little bit later, he has some free reign when Amarantha is preoccupied.
Yeah, like when Amarantha's fucking Reese.
Yeah.
You're telling me that Tamlin is just, what's he doing?
He's sitting there.
He's sitting there, right? It's like the start of a porno. Jeez. So I don't love that he's not helping her at all, and I think he could be. I do.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
So after this bargain, Feyre's a little defeated. And now in between her two main tasks, they won't let her rest. Because why would they? They give her all these stupid tasks.
Yeah.
Clean the floors with like muddy water. And basically
clean up the lentils.
The lentils. Oh, see, lentils were important.
Yeah.
Not the lentils.
Yeah.
And so She cleans the floor. The lady of the autumn court helps her.
Yeah.
Because she saved Lucian's life.
Yes, which I thought was sweet.
Yeah, we like her. She seems nice.
Yeah.
And the lentils. And of course, they say, clean up all these lentils out of this fireplace.
Yeah.
Whose fireplace is it?
Rasan's.
Right. Which, of course it is. And so he comes in the room and she's scared at first, but then he magics all the lentils away. And then when they come back, he tells the guards, he says, no more tasks for her. That's it. She's done. And so there are no more little simple tasks.
Yeah.
And on top of that, she starts getting like hot meals. Mm-hmm. So again, he's kind of going to bat for her, right? He's like, these little stupid chores are dumb. She can't just eat this like moldy bread. Give her hot meals. And so this starts happening. And so she's still a prisoner, but it seems manageable now.
Yeah, and also through these interactions, like she's learning more because Rhysand is telling her about, you know, the High Lords, how they all have like a beast form, and he even says like, oh, so many questions from a little human. So, you know, Feyre's still trying to piece together who the hell are all these people. And
yes,
he is actually answering her questions.
That's what I was just going to say. Yes, she's been asking Tamlin the whole book questions and getting no answers, or he's evading them. She's asking Rhys. Granted, they're simple questions, but he's answering her.
Yes.
She's getting a fuller scope of the world that she is in. And through Feyre, we are also getting a scope of the world that she's in, which I think is a really creative way to do that. We're learning right alongside her, which I like.
Yes.
And so
let's spice things up a notch.
Oh, we're going to get real spicy. So she's in her cell. She's getting her hot meals. Great. And she is beckoned to a party, the first party under the mountain.
Yeah, and she used to be Rhysand's date to the party.
Yes, and he dresses her.
Well, he calls her an escort.
She's essentially an escort. I think that's probably more appropriate than date.
Yes. So basically, there's these fairy servants that come to her, and they paint her body. So she's got like scraps of clothing on, just covering the major bits, and everything else is painted.
And it's painted in the same fashion as her
tattoo.
Bargain tattoo.
Yes. So it's kind of like camouflage. And she's like, why is this necessary? And he goes, well, how else would I know if anyone touches you? So now it's almost like he's claiming Feyre.
Right. And he says this, but we'll talk about that. Okay. So he puts this paint on her that will get smudged, whatever.
He even says, I don't like my belongings tampered with.
Yeah. Yeah. And as they go to this party, he's essentially parading her around naked. And this particular party is for midsummer. Now, as he brings her in, he tells everyone about the bargain. And he's like, haha. Because really, again, Tamlin's having no reaction. Amarantha's like, oh, why is she here?
Yeah.
Why is she dressed like that? What have you done with her? And he's like, we made a bargain. That's it. Just drops it.
Yeah. And he tells the whole bargain. 1 week with me at the night court. And Amarantha's kind of like, she like sits up a little straighter and she was like, what? Like, you could probably tell
she's probably like a little jealous.
Well, that makes me nervous. Like, the first time reading, I was like, oh shit, what's gonna happen now? But because all she says is, well, enjoy the party.
Right. You're like, oh no, he messed up.
Yeah.
This is bad. Not necessarily. I mean, she definitely is pissed, but she lets them go to the party and it's fine. And so he tells her to drink the fairy wine. She, in her mind, recounts, Alice mentioned, do not drink this fairy wine. It's different than the one you had on summer solstice. Not good. He essentially makes her drink it.
She gulps it down.
As these parties happen, we'll talk more about this particular party, but this is a theme. She drinks the wine, she has the paint on.
And she blacks out.
Yes.
And then wakes up having no clue of what happened.
Yeah, and we're going to talk more about our theories and how this looks on a first read.
Yeah.
Based on our thoughts on the second read. So we'll get there. But as she's at this first party, she literally ends up talking to Lucian, and she goes, "Is Tamlin all right? I mean, that spell Amarantha has him under to make him so silent." And Lucian's like, he's not under a spell. Because he's not.
No. He's just deciding not to engage.
And mind you, Lucian kind of says, like, hasn't it occurred to you that Tamlin's keeping quiet to avoid telling Amarantha, like, keying her into, if you torture Feyre, you torture me. Like, it could be worse for you if he does react.
I guess.
I think that's a cop-out.
Yes.
That's, like, what Lucian's explaining and saying that's why he's not talking.
Mm-hmm.
How much worse is it going to get for her?
I mean, okay, this is the thing, though, right? Is you have this High Lord of Springcourt who, you know, even though he has his powers diminished, he still has powers, as we have seen through this whole book. And you have this human girl who, you know, is really good at hunting. And she's going to bat time and time again to fight for him. And he's not reciprocating.
Can't even do anything. Like, even if she looks away and you give her a little wink, I mean...
I know.
Anything. You're telling me that she is so laser focused on your narcissistic ass that you can't even give her a little, like, signal, whatever. And as you mentioned before, he clearly does have some spare fucking time.
Yeah.
So we'll get there. And so she finds out Tamlin is not under spell. Okay, great. So he's just a dick.
And Tamlin has to sit there and watch Feyre make a fool of herself every night.
Right. And so these parties keep happening.
Yeah.
The paint keeps going on. She's dressed in cobwebs. She's
drinking the wine.
Hammered. And she even says that she wakes up every time and she has really vague memories of dancing.
Yeah.
But she says his hands are stained blue, meaning Rhys, and they touch her waist, her arms, but somehow never more than that. Yeah. And she makes a point to say that on multiple occasions as these parties keep happening, is that she's always touched appropriate places.
He's being respectful.
She's drunk and doesn't remember things, but there's also horrific things happening at these parties, so potentially good she's not remembering them. Again, on a first read, you're like, this guy's getting her drunk. Yeah. He's touching her, and it seems bad.
It's bad.
But there are very minuscule details showing, okay, it's not crossing that line of inappropriate. Nothing's really happening.
Yes.
And so, in one of these parties, the High Lord of Summer's there, as are all the other High Lords. And there's a summer court person brought forward.
Oh, yeah.
For, like, trying to escape.
Yes.
And Amarantha goes, Rhys, go into his mind, figure out what happened. Mm-hmm. And what ends up happening, long story short...
Well, hold on. So now we know that Rhysand has the ability to go into people's minds.
Yes.
Which I felt like, I was like, whoa! Like, that's huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So not only is he her whore, but he's, like, her henchman. Like,
yeah,
he's doing her dirty work.
Right, like, whatever she's saying to him, like, go into his mind, do this, do that, he's doing. And so that's where you start kind of feeling like, is he good, is he bad, I don't know. And so she's telling him to, okay, go to this summer court person, shatter his mind, okay, fine. And so in this process, he basically just kills this person quickly, instantaneously. And Feyre says at the end, I wondered whether anyone but he and the High Lord of Summer Court knew that the killing had been a mercy. I was willing to bet that there had been others involved in that escape plan, perhaps even the High Lord of the Summer Court himself. So basically Feyre says, okay, he kind of mercy killed this guy.
Yeah.
On top of that, she's also having all these thoughts like, okay, he is having me drink and is touching the paint, but it's always appropriate places. And because she doesn't remember the parties, that paint serves as a way for her to know that he never touches her inappropriately.
Yes.
And so we're seeing these like little kernels of kindness, not very obvious, but they're there.
Yeah. And Feyre's now like starting to pick up on it.
Right. And so she goes to all these parties. It's kind of repetitive, a bunch of nights. But now her second task arrives.
Oh boy. So the second task. So Feyre is now once again thrown into the courtroom. Throne room.
I honestly was like, that's fine.
Are we going to jail? Anyways. So basically, we have said before that Feyre is illiterate. So it only makes sense that her second task has to do with reading.
But, like, I don't think Amarantha knows.
No, she didn't know. So it's just, I guess, poor luck on Feyre's part.
Right, like, I guess how the first task was good luck that she's a hunter.
Yeah.
This one's like, oopsies.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess in theory, this was supposed to be the easier task.
Yeah. She's like, oh, God.
Yeah. So basically, Feyre's, like, in, like, this one kind of cage, and Lucien is in this other cage. They're next to each other. And Feyre has to solve this riddle, and
this bitch loves riddles.
Yeah. So like she has to read this riddle, and then she has to choose number 1, 2, or 3 for like the answer. And while she's trying to figure this out, there's this like ceiling that's being dropped with spikes. So if Feyre doesn't figure it out, they're getting smushed.
Right, her and Lucien.
Yeah.
I think it's also really funny as we're talking about this in depth how like, Amarantha uses Lucien as a bargaining tool, not Tamlin. Like,
I know.
Every time it's like, oh, Lucien's in danger.
Yeah, you know what? That's a good point. Like, why wouldn't she put Tamlin in there instead?
Maybe because she doesn't want to risk Tamlin because she still has a hot spring.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
but I think it is funny how she's like, always Lucien.
Yeah.
Poor guy.
Yeah. This is what happens when you're friends with Faye. I can't speak. Anyways, so she's like reading this riddle, and Amarantha's like, you know, is there something wrong? And Lucien's like, answer it! Like, he's freaking out because it's getting closer and closer, and she just knows
that she can't read.
No, and she's just like, oh, fuck me. So I think it's really funny how SJM is like slowly showing, like, writing how Feyre is trying to pronounce the words.
Yeah, like there's
it's like 3 ... grass ... grass hope ... grasshoppers ... like it's just brutal.
Right, because you know there's a ceiling crushing on her, and you're like, read the fucking words. I almost felt like Lucien. Yes. I'm like, Feyre, come on.
Yeah, you know what this task was kind of reminding me of? What was that show that Joe Rogan used to host?
Fear Factor?
Yeah. I felt like this was like a Fear Factor thing.
Right, except like they would really die. Well, hopefully no one on Fear Factor died.
I don't know. Well, anyways, so Feyre's like, I have no time left. So she goes to press one of the buttons, and she was just like, I'm just going to go for it. And she feels like this little like zap in her hand. And she's like, what? So she like pulls her hand away and goes back, and she feels the zap again. And she does this with the other two, and there's no zap at like one of them, whether it was 1, 2, or 3, whichever. And she presses the button, and guess what? The ceiling stops moving.
Right, and she even says, as she's feeling these zaps, she's like looking at Rhys, because she's like, it's him. And she knows. And he's not like showing any emotion.
No.
But she knows. And so, as we know that he can go into your mind and stuff.
Now he's talking to her.
Now he starts talking to her. And she's super upset. She's like, how am I going to beat this third task? I can't even fucking read. And she's feeling real low about herself. And he's saying nice things into her mind. He's saying, don't let her see you cry. Stand up. Don't give her the satisfaction of seeing you break. And he's saying, like, stare her down. No tears. Like, wait till you're back in your cell. He says, don't look at Tamlin. Just stare at her. And so she does all this. She's obeying. And she's like, okay. And I think she's at such a low mental point that she's just listening. And she needs that, like, almost like directions to just keep herself together. And she even mentions on more than one occasion, as she's still there, she says, Rhysand's words echoed through my mind, holding me together. Now she goes back to her cell.
That was literally like a knife to the gut. I remember when I read that the first time, I was like, Oh my God.
Yeah, because like he literally is. And then she goes back to her cell and she's just devastated. She's crying. And then he like pops into her cell. And he's like, hey. And it's funny because he's still like kind of a little bit of a dick. He comes in and goes, still weeping.
Yeah, but then he like bends down like next to her and licks her tears off her cheeks.
Yeah, so I don't like that.
No.
And I guess this part makes me kind of laugh a little because she stops crying. And he goes, I figured that would get you to stop crying. And like, I guess, yeah, it's like the shock factor. But he's kind of saying like, why are you crying? You passed the second task. Like, you have one more left. Like, you got this, you know? And he's kind of a dick, but also kind of making good points.
He's also trying to be like a little funny. Like he's like, oh, I'm trying to think of ways to torment you when you come to my court. Like, should I make you read?
Right. And I think he knows with her, when she's defeated, she's emotionless. If she's feeling that spark of anger, it shows there's fight in her. Yeah. And I think he's trying to bring that out of her. And so she's kind of like firing back, being feisty with him. But he tells her, okay, I'll spare you the escort duties tomorrow. So he's kind of, again, being a little bit nice. We're not sure how to feel. But then he leaves, and she makes a comment to herself and says, it took me a long while to realize that Rhysand, whether he knew it or not, had effectively kept me from shattering completely.
Again, knife to the gut.
Yeah.
I think at this point I was Team Rhysand.
I think I was intrigued. I didn't have enough where I was full team, but I knew I was like, even from a reading standpoint, right? You're seeing a lot more of this guy than fucking Tamlin.
Yeah, I think I was just over Tamlin. I was like, no, fuck him. He doesn't get a redemption arc. We're gonna go with the Morley Gray. For
blonde.
Sure.
Yeah. Get him out.
You and the blonde, bro. I feel like any chance you get, like he's blonde. So he's blonde. It's because he's blonde.
Yep.
You're a hater.
That's how it is. And so she basically is just like devastated. Even after he kept her from shattering, she's not having a good time. So she's just laying in her cell. She says, thinking of Tamlin made everything worse, which she means like she misses him, but out of context, that makes me laugh.
Yeah.
She's like, thinking of this guy. My life sucks. And so she was saying, like, I knew the third task would kill me. Okay, fine. So she's having just a horrible time. She knows she's not going to leave this mountain alive. That's what she's telling herself. And so while she's in her cell just feeling super defeated and broken, all of a sudden this music enters her cell.
Yeah.
Also, want to cry.
Yes. Well, on the second read.
On the first, I think I felt like a little sense of hope in the first read.
Yeah. I was confused. I remember that. I was like, where the fuck is this music coming from?
Yeah, I think, but I was like...
Because I thought she was, like, hallucinating or dreaming. So I was like, oh my god, this poor girl, like, she's that low. She's creating, like, a hopeful situation for herself.
Yeah. I do see what you're saying, but I think the way she described the music, it made me feel, like, a bit of emotion, just like, okay, like, she has something to live for. Even if she's imagining it...
She has something to live for.
Yeah, like, it just was like...
Tamlin is her something to live for.
Oh, God. So she describes this music, and she basically just describes this like the most beautiful music that you have ever heard in your life. And she just says, you know, there's a palace in the sky, a hall of moonstone, and just fantasy dwells in peace. And you're like, how lovely.
Yes.
And so this little bit of hope kind of reignites her. She feels, okay, probably still going to die, but she's not feeling as gloom and as defeated. And so there's 2 more days until the final trial, and then she's like, all right, well, we'll see what happens either way.
Yeah. So now there's another party.
Of course.
So she says that, like, Rhysand took longer than usual to summon her, and basically when she ends up at this party, all of a sudden these fingers brush hers. And who is it? Tammy boy! He finally comes around.
The day before the final trial.
Yes. And, you know, obviously she's probably floored that, you know, he found his way to her.
Yeah, Yeah, she's hyped.
Yeah, so, of course, what happens? They end up going to, like, a closet or something, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, but...
they went to, like, a little empty room. I don't know.
Yeah, and, now all of a sudden, the beast is back, and Tamlin slams his body into her, and they're making out. She's trying to take his shirt off, and he's, like, biting her neck again.
And she's saying, I want him here.
Yeah, she's, like, unbuckling his pants, and all of a sudden, Rhysand is like, this is very shameful. And they're both caught red-handed.
And I think, first of all, I agree with Rhys. And second of all, he didn't say one word to her. Like, I get it, fine, you couldn't in the main throne room, because obviously speaking would,
Mind you, his mask is still on.
Yeah.
Right? Aren't all their masks still on?
Yeah, well, there's some of the curse. And, yeah, like, I just feel like, you would expose
Making
yourself
out with Jason in the closet.
She's like, ooh, this gets me. They didn't speak at all in the throne room. Fine. It would reveal you. Okay. You just start ripping at her neck.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like, you haven't talked, you won't even look at her, and the first chance that you have to get her alone is you're mauling her again. You're not asking, like, oh my god, like, how are you? Like, what's going on? Like, I love you, like, blah, blah, blah. Like, he could have been so, like, comforting, I guess.
And still, like, been kissing her, like, kissing her face. Are you okay?
Yeah.
Like, we're gonna get out of this?
Yeah, no, he was just
trying to have sex with her.
He's trying to get a nut off before he had to go back to Amarantha.
Which is insane. So, Rhys feels the way we feel, and he's, like, shameful.
Yeah.
Disgusting. And so, he says, look at what you've done to my pet. And so, he says that, but I think what he means and what he's trying to point out is Feyre, in her true Under the Mountain attire, is wearing her cobwebs and her paint. And her paint is all fucked up because Tamlin is a ravenous beast grabbing at her boobs and butt and
everything. And Rhysand's like, I wonder how, like, Amarantha's gonna punish you, when she finds out. And, Tamlin, like, removes his hands and he steps away. And he looks at Feyre and he leaves.
Right, and it's Feyre's shocked because he leaves under Rhys's instruction, and he says, so Rhys says to Tamlin, be a clever High Lord, buckle your belt, fix your clothes before you go out there. And she says, to my horror, he did as Rhysand instructed.
So are we surprised when Rhysand first showed up to the Spring Court, Tamlin's head was on the floor, groveling.
Right. He listens to him because
which is
pathetic.
Yeah. It's just crazy. But you know what really gets me? Is like Tamlin leaves and Rhysand makes that little joke like, oh, if you're that desperate for release, you should have just asked me.
Right. And he kind of goes off that. Again, you think he's kind of an asshole, but he kind of goes in and starts kissing her, and you're like, whoa, what's going on?
Yeah.
But then
Amarantha
comes in. Right. And so...
Okay, so I want to ask you, now, like, thinking of all this, right? Do you think, like, maybe, like, Tamlin squealed to Amarantha? Like, oh, like, they're in there?
No, I think she just was coming in.
Yeah, you think? Mm-hmm. Like, she saw Tamlin leave and, like, where it was Rhys, whatever?
I think she didn't even notice Tamlin was gone.
No.
In my head, I think she just, like, noticed that Feyre and Rhys were gone.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she almost, like, brought them in. She brought Tamlin in to catch them. And because she even says, I knew it was a matter of time. You humans are all the same. So I think, in my head, she didn't realize Tamlin was gone. Tamlin's back at her side. She was like, oh, I went to the bathroom. I don't know. And then she notices that Rhys and Feyre are gone, and she brings Tamlin to almost, like, stick it to him. That's what I think.
Okay.
In, like, my head.
Yeah, okay. I can see that.
But Rhys does this because her paint is all fucked up.
Yeah.
So there needs to be a reason for that.
Exactly. So he covers for Tamlin.
Right.
Another act of kindness.
I know. And so she goes to her cell, and here comes Rhys again.
She's like, what do you want? And he was like, just a moment of peace and quiet. Like, oh, hard day at the office, boy? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, like, he's going for comfort, you know? And he also, at this point, they also, both of them point out that he's never touched her inappropriately. Because he even says, he's like, Tamlin's not going to kill me after this because I have never, in theory, done anything wrong. Mm-hmm. Like, I have never touched you.
Yes.
Inappropriately. So he should not kill me. And then, interestingly, he reveals to Feyre that his father killed Tamlin's father and his brothers.
Boom.
So we find out that the person from the enemy court was Rhys and his father.
Which, insane how it all connects, right?
Yeah, so we'll talk about that. We just want to point that out, that this was revealed to Feyre.
Yeah. So, now it is the day of the final task.
We're here. Third and final.
Oh boy. So, again, Amarantha brings Feyre, Feyre's taken to Amarantha for this final task. Mm-hmm. And Amarantha asks her, like, oh, any words before you die? And Feyre turns to Tamlin and she's like, I love you. No matter what she says, no matter with my only insignificant human heart, I love you. And guess what? He doesn't react. He didn't even grip the arms of his throne.
He doesn't care.
Like, she's pledging her love to you. She knows she's probably going to die, and you can't even have any sort of flinch, emotion, anything.
Right. And so she's devastated by this.
We're devastated by this.
Outside my sigh, I'm also devastated. And so Amarantha now reveals Feyre's final task. The final task is that she has to kill 3 innocent Fae.
Mm-hmm. But they have bags over their heads.
They do.
So she doesn't know who she's killing until, like, the bag is removed.
Right. And Amarantha's saying, hey, you don't know who they are yet, but just so you know, they're innocent. Like, just really being an asshole.
Yeah.
And so her point of this is, like, you know, you humans, it shouldn't matter to you.
Yes.
Mind you, Feyre's like, this sucks. And so her, you know, big revelation, she has to kill a fairy, fall in love with a fairy, then be forced to kill a fairy to keep that love. Like, okay, Feyre, let's keep it going. Mm-hmm. So the first phase, bag is removed. They beg her. She stabs him.
That was probably really rough. Like, yeah. I remember reading that. I'm like, oh my God, is she going to do it? Is she going to do it? I'm like, she's got to do it. She's got to save Tamlin.
Right. And, like, you know that, but SJM does a great job of, like, writing the colors of the fairies' eyes.
Yeah.
Their expressions, their begging. And you're like, fuck.
Yeah.
And so she does it once. And now she's like, gotta do it 2 more times.
Well, so also, Amarantha's like, she's like, don't look so miserable. Aren't you having fun?
Like, okay, hot take, Amarantha, cold-hearted bitch, but, like, hysterical.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, she just, like, says the most out-of-pocket
comments.
Funny things.
Yeah.
The second fairy is a bit more understanding than the first one. They're like, okay, they start saying the mother's prayer to themselves. Mm-hmm. And she's just falling apart.
Yeah, she's like, how am I going to do this 2 more times?
But
she does. She stabs her right in the heart.
And now 1 more left.
Oh boy.
And so she pulls the bag. Now her hands are covered in blood. Pulls the bag.
And guess who's underneath the bag?
Tamlin. So how he didn't react to her confessing his love, we find out that it was actually the adder next to Amarantha. But what I want to point out is that him not reacting was so believable for us.
Yeah. Because
he hasn't reacted.
Exactly.
So you're like, what is going on?
Mm-hmm.
So now she has to kill Tamlin. And you're like, what's going on? So now Feyre's mind is spinning.
All over
and
the
she's
place.
Like, Amarantha wouldn't kill him. Like, she loves him.
Mm-hmm.
Confused. Now Feyre starts going back and back and back. Okay. And she remembers all these moments that people reference Tamlin's heart of stone. Mm-hmm. Now she thinks this is an expression
But it's not.
And so at one point, someone
How
said...
perfect.
Right. Someone said, for someone with a heart of stone, yours is certainly soft these days. Another time, the adder said, though you have a heart of stone, Tamlin, you certainly keep a host of fear inside it. So, Feyre's like, is this real?
Mm-hmm. So she takes a gamble.
But here's... I know, I'm sorry for beating a dead horse. Do we find this corny?
Yes.
Like...
But as a new reader, I don't think so.
I think I did.
I honestly can't remember now.
It was just very, like, stereotypical fairy tale.
Well, I remember being happy that, this was the case. That, like...
Yeah, because we do at this point, although
we want Tamlin to die.
Yeah. Well, in this episode, we're kind of shitting on Tamlin, but at this point, as new readers, we're definitely happy. Like, there's a scapegoat and, like, a way out of this situation.
If not for not for Tamlin's sake, but for Feyre.
Right, because she does love him.
Yeah.
And so, she stabs him.
Yeah, he's gone. But, lo and behold, Amarantha is not having it.
Well, right, because Pharaoh's right.
Yeah.
His heart was made of stone, and he's fine.
Yeah, so, basically... Tamlin cries out as she stabs him. Mm-hmm. Before she stabs him, she tells him again, I love you. Mm-hmm. And the mask didn't fall off. Mm-hmm. And Amarantha's like, yeah, I'll just free them when I want. I never said when. Mm-hmm. So this tricky little bitch who knows if she was ever really gonna free them.
And she said, I only said I would free them instantaneously if you solved the riddle.
Yeah.
I never said when I would free them when you beat the tasks.
Exactly. And, everyone, I think there was like a few of them who were like, free them. Right. And she was like, no. And then she looks at Feyre and she's like, now I'm going to kill you.
Yeah.
So now you're like, oh shit.
Things are about to go down.
Yeah.
And so... she's, like, screaming at her. She's like, admit you don't love him.
Yeah.
Admit you're a coward.
She's raging.
And you're like, oh, no. No. And so, all of a sudden, she's getting thrown to the ground. She's getting ripped apart. And she can't even scream because she's in so much pain. And Rhys calls out for her.
Mm-hmm. And with a knife in his hands.
Yes. And she says, Rhysand yelled my name again. Yelled it as though he cared. Wow. And so they're just breaking her bones.
Yeah. But I would like to mention how Rhysand is the one who has the knife and is fighting for Feyre. Where's Tamlin?
Right. And mind you, as Amarantha's whore, he has this whole facade. He is risking his whole facade.
Yes.
Right now in this moment by trying to kill her. He's exposing his true colors.
Exactly.
Mind you, we know Tamlin is against Amarantha. It wouldn't even be a risk of exposure, and he's doing nothing. Nothing.
No, but you know what he does do? He begs Amarantha not to kill her.
Right. This man with his fucking begging, I'm so over it.
Yeah. And so then, after that, Feyre's like thinking of the riddle, and she finds out that the answer is love.
Of fucking course it is. I think I knew it was love when it says, like, scorned, I'm a difficult beast to defeat, because scorned love. Like, I feel like I kind of knew then, or when I kill, I do it slow. I think in those moments, that's kind of what, like, keyed me into it. Mm-hmm. But, like, again... And I think at that point, when the riddle came out, I was like, oh, there's a riddle. Of course the answer is love.
Okay, yeah. Totally, I get that.
So, yeah, so she solves the riddle.
And then...
she's dead.
Amarantha kills her.
Yeah. Cracked her fucking spine.
That... I remember jaw to the floor when I first read that.
For sure.
Whoa!
For sure.
Oh, show.
So... she's now dead, but she's seeing, like, herself. And she's like, what the
She's
fuck?
having an out-of-body experience.
Yes, but she realizes that she's looking at herself from Rhysand's eyes.
Yes.
And she sees her freaking body all just twisted and broken. And because she solved the riddle, the curse is broken.
Yes.
the bargain was made, and Amarantha can't even stop it. All of a sudden, everyone gets their powers back.
Mm-hmm. And Tamlin,
yes,
kills Amarantha.
So again, Rhys, when he didn't have all his powers back, was going to kill her with a knife, risking it all.
Mm-hmm.
Tamlin didn't do shit. Now, Tamlin has all of his powers back, and he's like, oh, I can do it now. First of all, that's great. You waited until you were at full power because you're a coward.
Yes.
Second of all, she just killed the fucking quote-unquote love of your life.
Yes.
And your first thought is to go kill her, which I respect you killing her, but, like, are you fucking kidding me? She risked it all for you.
Yep.
And you don't care.
Twisted love.
I just, like, don't understand that thought process. But fine, he goes, and I guess maybe it's the rage fueling him. He goes over to Amarantha, and doesn't he, like, bite her throat out?
Yeah, he rips her throat out. He unleashes the beast. Bites another girl's neck.
Of course he does. So
right for the
dead.
jugular every time.
Right.
Yeah, so now so Amarantha's dead, Feyre's dead, and Tamlin comes over and, like, essentially drops, like, a spark of his essence into her.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually all the other High Lords follow suit.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? He says, I love you. And all of a sudden, she's lifted back up into her body, and she's alive!
But, though she's alive, she's now a High Fae.
Ah!
Which, amazing. Like, I wanted that the whole book. So
I feel like that's, like, where it was leading, right?
Right. So that's my point, I guess, is I don't mind that. Like, predictable plot that happens, kind of fine with it. It was more so the riddle and this, that, and the other that, like, I'm not into. And so, although we're hyped that she's a High Fae, she's not super hyped.
Yeah.
And so Tamlin's like, this is the only way that we could have saved you.
Mm-hmm.
Which, again, I'm happy.
Yeah, I mean,
I'd want to be a High Fae.
Exactly. I mean, you could see all that they're able to do. What is a measly human life compared to this Fae life?
And you also get hotter.
And you have magical powers.
Sign me up.
For sure.
And so now Tamlin can take his mask off. Yay. She's like, you're beautiful. Okay, great. So now they're having just a beautiful time. But we can't end the book without saying goodbye to our pal.
Yeah. So as the story is drawing to a close here, Feyre wakes up and she's feeling a tug to go, like, outside or, like, on a ledge or something from the mountain. And she walks out and there's Rhysand standing there waiting for her. And what does she say? What do you want? And he's just like, I just want to say goodbye. And so they talk about, you know, how she's going to have to see him again eventually because of the bargain they have. And, you know, she's not really pumped.
But she also, I think, is confused by him because she even asks him why. And what she means by that is she's like, why did you react that way?
Mm-hmm.
And he says, when the legends get written, I didn't want to be remembered for standing on the sidelines. So, like, he's a noble guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I wasn't going to just stand there. Like, I'm not evil. I wasn't actually enjoying being her whore, all these things. So you're like, huh, okay.
Yeah, and he also says, like, I didn't want you to fight alone or to die alone.
Right, he was there for her.
Oh, God. The setup, man.
And so, they're saying their goodbyes.
Mm-hmm. And they're talking. And he's like, okay, well, goodbye then. And I quote, he bowed at the waist, those wings vanishing entirely, and had begun to fade into the nearest shadow. He went rigid. His eyes locked on mine, wide and wild, and his nostrils flared. Shock, pure shock flashed across his features at whatever he saw on my face and stumbled back a step. Actually stumbled.
I got chills.
Woo!
So, first read, you're like,
What?
Because, yeah, like, it's a big enough moment where you know it's a thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, something's happening.
Yeah.
Second read, you're like, fuck yes.
And in book 2, we find out why that is a fuck yes.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Oh, guys, book 2 is next. Okay. So, fine, that happens, and he disappears after that. He winnows away. And winnowing is when you vanish and you can, like, teleport, essentially.
Yeah.
So he's gone. And so, that's it. Tamlin and her leave the way they came in, through the tunnels, and...
he says, let's go home.
Yeah. And she keeps saying that, right? She says, I beheld the rose-covered manor, home. I've made it. I brought us both home. And then she ends and says, let's go home. I said, and I took his hand. And that's it. Happily ever after. And the book ends. She beat Amarantha. She beat the trials and the riddle. She's home with her love.
Yeah. And I am so happy that we are now done with this book, because now we could really get into the nitty gritty.
I think book 2 is both of our favorites.
Yeah.
In the series.
Yeah.
So we're so excited. We are excited to talk about it. We're ready. And I think book 1 is a great way to set up the plot.
Yeah, all backstory.
We're done with it, but book 2, it's like a whole different world.
That's where you see, like, the true character development, like, really step in. And you're kind of, you know, given this whole other world.
New world.
Yeah.
New people. We can't wait to share it with you guys. We're so excited. We're going to scream a lot more. And so we will catch you guys next week for A Court of Mist and Fury, Part 1. And we'll see you guys then.
Get excited!
Because we are so excited. All right. See you then.
Bye.